this has to do with kind of the name behind your organization, Decolonizing the Music Room. So kind of asking about your journey, like when did you first become aware of the influence of white supremacy in the music room?
Yeah, so as you said, I went to Howard, and I'm so grateful for my time at Howard. There was a lot about my the foundation of my thinking that I think was framed there, and just highlighting systemic issues. Um, I don't know if I realized it quite as much when I was there, but once I got out into the field and began teaching, the contrast of moving from an HBCU to a field that is overwhelmingly white dominated and functioning in the way that I was used to functioning, but butting up against things, I think highlighted even more things that we had talked about in school. And so it grew, but there was a point at which I was teaching elementary, and then my oldest child entered elementary. And the level of disparity, because my child went to a different school than I taught,
Hmm.
was so extreme, so obviously extreme. And there are things that I had kind of known about, but it made me ask much more specific questions and do a lot more reading and listening into framing things and just having language to name the things that I was noticing and having theory to frame what is behind all of this. There's so much stuff in our society where we just, we think it is like it is just because it's like that. It's just been like that, and we make up all these other reasons behind it.
Right.
And one that's really obvious that, people really don't try to use an excuse for as much now is, how we used to say, people live in segregated neighborhoods because people like to be around their own people. That's like a really good example of that, where it's like, no, that's not what's behind that.
Right.
And then you learn, you know, the very foundation of it. So that started to happen in education broadly and in music ed specifically.
Okay. Very interesting. So it's interesting. It seems like one of the first ways that you noticed it was sending your child to get music education, and you saw the difference in how you were teaching things in your classroom and how they were being taught to children in other classrooms.
So it was more broad than that. It was something as simple as, my child's school was 2 miles from where I was teaching,
Okay.
where I was teaching about 50-50 Black and Brown, Latina, Latinx, Chicano, Hispanic identifying students. Um, my school was underground. It was really old. When it would rain, like water would run down the walls. It was super overcrowded. Class sizes were big.
Right.
Um, we had started our kids in Montessori, and there was a public school in the district that had a lottery program that my son got into, just a couple of miles away. But when I went there, obviously above ground, classroom sizes were capped at the actual state maximum. There was plenty of room to move. There were, lots of financial resources. Even the way our Black and Brown students are policed as they move through spaces, even, by our own people, just because there's just been this tradition of like a higher level of policing and there are a bunch of dynamics into that. I walk over to my kids' school and teachers like, all right, let's go to lunch, and everybody's skipping around, running through the courtyard, and just this different level of freedom. And
Mhm.
so that was kind of the start of it. And I got into community work in my district. But at the same time, as I grew in my music ed, just teaching knowledge, I started to ask more questions about the things I was teaching. I had my own approach and I had my own way of doing things, but having to learn more about just strict music education while I was questioning all those disparities at the same time is what really mashed it together. And it wasn't even me going into my child's classroom. It was
Okay.
just being able to take a look at broader issues. And because I was a teacher in the district, I trained with every teacher. I knew what every teacher sounded like. I knew what every curriculum looked like that we were expected to have in the classroom.
Interesting. Okay, cool.